Hello, my friends. My name is Vince Conaway, and this is my introduction to the hammered dulcimer. So the hammered dulcimer is the ancestor of a piano going back at least to the 1100s that we can prove, but it's probably even older. If you look inside a piano and you press a key, it will hit a string, and the dulcimer gave them the idea. It's basically just a harp that you hit before they added the keyboard. Now, the thing that drives piano players crazy is that my high notes are on the left, my low notes are on the right. It is the opposite of a keyboard or a harp. However, it is not complicated and it is not difficult. It is just different. It's a simple series of patterns, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. Now, the hammered dulcimer that I am playing is built by Dusty Strings. They are my personal favorite maker, but there are a number of other very highly reputed makers out there. I really enjoy Dusty Strings, not least because they are significantly overbuilt. They have a lot of framing, and it makes the instrument a little heavier than it might need to be otherwise. However, it also means that the instrument holds a tuning, and it is a tank. As a person who travels constantly and has watched baggage handlers drop this instrument off of a ramp, that is an important factor for me. This particular dulcimer is a discontinued model D35. They have now replaced it with a D45. It is what is known as a 16-15 dulcimer. And what that is I have 16 courses on the treble bridge, 15 courses on the bass bridge. Now, a course is just a series of more than one string meant to be played together. So, for example, this instrument has 2 strings per course. However, some of the Eastern European versions have 4 or even 5 strings per course. But course is a nice term that doesn't take into account how many strings you are playing together. It is just strings that you are playing together. So again, this is a 16-15. In North America, it's also very common to find a slightly smaller version, which is known as a 12-11, and that is basically this instrument disregarding these strings and missing the top one as well. So it's basically from here to here. It's got a very similar range to a modern violin or mandolin, with the low G being the same G below middle C that I have right here. Now, the 16-15 goes almost into viola range with a low D, and there are other instruments, both Western European dulcimers and especially Eastern European dulcimers, that get significantly bassier, but this is a standard size. However, everything that I'm going to show you today is going to be equally applicable to a 16-15 as to a 12-11 in order to make this have the broadest possible use. So what we're going to start off with is major scales, just good old do, re, mi. And what that is in this instrument, it is 2 white marks separated by 2 black marks. Most dulcimers, not all dulcimers, but the vast majority, will have some sort of marking that is a pattern. It is mark, blank, blank, mark, blank, blank, mark, blank, blank, mark. Those are showing me major scales. In this case, it's a G major. If I go, I'm just looking at these marks, these white and black markings right here. White, black, black, white, white, black, black, white. When I was first learning to play, what I would do is I would use a dimmer switch to drop the light levels to where I couldn't quite make out the strings, but I had to focus on the bridges. And I used that as an exercise to keep my eyes concentrating on the part of the instrument they need to be paying attention to. So again, that G major scale, it's just white, black, black, white. On the other side, white, black, black, white. It includes F sharp. You don't need to think about that. You just need to know those markings, and they do the work for you. Now, getting a little more advanced, the pattern continues between bass and treble. So, if we do the same pattern, but consider these 2 white marks as equivalent, and we go, that happens to be a C major scale starting on middle C. And again, all I'm doing is looking at those markings, white, black, black, white, white, black, black, white. It's not a complicated instrument, it's just a little different, but as long as you think about your scales and do, re, mi, it makes a lot of sense. Now, in addition to those major scales, there are other ones laid out. This particular dulcimer also really likes D, has a little bit in F and a little bit in A. Don't need to think about that. I'm just going to focus right now on C and G. However, I also can play their relative minor scales. The relative minor is basically the exact same sequence of notes begun 2 notes earlier. So the relative minor of C major is A minor, and it is the same series of notes, just begun a little earlier, 2 notes earlier. So you started on the A. And again, you're just focusing on these marks, and the patterns are all built in. Now, the dulcimer also really likes E minor and B minor and a few others here and there, but I'm going to concentrate just on C major, G major, and A minor because those are the ones that are simplest, although the others are the equivalent positions, just in different places. But they're also the ones, the scales that are common to all of the Western dulcimers, so that everything I'm showing you is equally applicable, no matter the size of your instrument. From there, we can easily go into simple tunes. And the reason I became a hammered dulcimer player was because I played, on accident, Mary Had a Little Lamb on my first try. Now again, what I'm doing is I'm focusing on these markings, and the markings are showing me everything. I'm playing this out of the scale of G major, and I'm starting it on number 3. Now you will have noticed that instead of going across, I went up in a certain place because that is easier than, but I have that same note in 2 different places. The G, the 5th note of the scale, is in 2 places. It is across from the root and it is 5 up. Now you have that for 2 notes per scale. You can play the 5th and the 6th in 2 different places. And that's really convenient when you're arranging music. You can use whichever one of those fits best what you are playing. But again, it does get a little confusing because you do find it in 2 different places. Now the why of that goes back to the Middle Ages, because if you go straight up the side, you get a different scale than if you go across, as I had previously indicated. And the 1 note difference there is the 7th note. And that's because in medieval music, only 1 accidental is permitted, and that's on the 7th note, which on a C scale is B, which is why our modern symbol for a flat is a lowercase b. The dulcimer is all built around medieval ideas of music. So the more that you understand about medieval music, the easier the dulcimer gets. But it is not necessary. If you can sing do-a-deer, you can play a hammered dulcimer just looking at those marks. Show you everything you need to know. plus a whole lot of practice. Now again, you have a duplicate on the 5 and the 6, which means you have a certain amount of leeway when you're arranging tunes. But it also is a handy thing to remember when you're doing your exercises. Just very simple, basic. And that's one that I personally recommend, aside from playing scales, is just going 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4. And you can vary it up. Now there, I'm bringing the second octave into it. G major doesn't have just the one scale over here, but it also exists connecting bass to treble right below that C scale that I showed earlier. So what I have, and I'm showing now, is I have 2 octaves in G that go straight up. And I do the same thing in C, where I have that. So I have the 2 octaves in C, and I have the 2 octaves in G. After that, it's just 10,000 hours of playing. Now, there are certain patterns that make accompanying other musicians on the dulcimer fairly simple. And a lot of musicians, a lot of dulcimer players call those patterns the triangles, because the way that certain notes line up mean that you can hit the roots of a chord, 1, 3, 5 or 1, 5, 8. Very, very simple, using triangle patterns. So for example, that's D major with the D, F sharp, and A. Now a different triangle can go straight across to D, A, D, which is what is referred to as a good old-fashioned power chord, just 1, 5, 8. And it's just an open chord and again, that happens to be where D lives. But you can do it on a number of positions. So C. Pardon me, I just love the tone of this particular instrument. I am a fan. And that helps you when you are accompanying other musicians. So if you are playing along to chords, for example, if you're doing some simple Irish music, D major, G major. If you toss in an open A, you've got every Irish tune ever made. And again, those triangles give you the basic chord pattern. And you can use whichever of those you might need for the song at hand. And now, the advanced lesson. The most characteristic ornament that a hammered dulcimer makes is tremolo. It's the Italian word for trembling, and if you watched bluegrass mandolin players, it's a whole lot of motion as they get that pick going. On a dulcimer, it is a very simple, very fluid, very calm Just let it bounce, let it go, and there you go. The trick is to get the grip correctly. If you have too loose of a grip, it doesn't work so well. If you have too tightly, you will squish it. But if you get it just Goldilocks, it's a very similar technique to a snare drum. And again, it's a lot more simple than it looks. It's just... The really tricky thing about learning a new tune on hammered dulcimer, however, is the fact that you need to do a lot more arranging than on other instruments. Because, for example, when I mentioned earlier that you have the fifth and the sixth, in different places, means that as you go, you have the opportunity, but also the requirement to figure out which one of those you're going to play. And a big factor on that is whether you start on your left or your right hand. It's a very different feel to play than it is. And it's simpler as a player if you alternate almost directly right, left, right, left, right, left, or left, right, left, right, left, right. With some exceptions, if you're going to whack the same note twice in a row, sometimes it's convenient to bring the other hammer in. Sometimes it's easier just give it a whack twice while you're there. Once again, that's going to depend on every single individual piece, and every individual player is going to have their own opinion. Every single one is valid. Do what sounds cool. Have fun with it. And I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much. I am going to have some more lessons online, but this is the very basics of Dulcimer 101. Have a beautiful day and happy playing.